All right, I had some follow-ups after thinking about taking my road trip, and I just wanted to share them with you. First thing was, I was thinking about what would it be like to take a longer road trip. So I live here in South Florida, so to get out of Florida takes between 6 and 8 hours. It's a long trip to get out of Florida because I'm on the southern tip. If you're driving fast, you can go a little faster, but anyway, it takes some amount of hours to get out of there. So to get to, like, let's say Gainesville from South Florida, where the University of Florida is, it takes approximately 5 hours. To get to Tampa, it's like around 4. To go north of Tampa, if you're going to go out that way, it can take longer. If you're going to Jacksonville, it's somewhere around 7 or so. And then as you're going to, like, maybe Tallahassee or something, it takes even longer. So if you're going to plan a road trip, you have to account for that. So I'm using, like, Gainesville as my baseline because it's sort of that upper middle part of the state, the 5-hour trip. So I've done that trip a few times, and it takes about 5 hours to get there. Now, the thing is, if you're going to drive your Tesla, it takes longer because you're going to have to supercharge twice along the way. The first one would have to be at that Fort Drum Service Plaza that I showed in the video, and the next one is a little further up, about another 100 miles or so further up the road that you have to stop at again, and then you can make it the rest of the way to Gainesville. And there's a supercharger in Gainesville, so you're in good shape there. But those two stops each are for about 20 minutes. That's another 40 minutes on your trip. So suddenly it goes from a 5-hour trip-ish to closer to a 6-hour trip, because you're going to have to charge when you get there too, because there's really no question that you're going to have to charge at some point. So it became a 6-hour trip. So the 5-hour trip is already kind of a long trip, and now making it 6, it doesn't seem like much, but when you're in the car and driving, it feels like a lot more. So that was the one observation I was going to make, because I live in an area that's so far removed from everything, because I'm in South Florida. Getting around South Florida, no problem. I can make my way around pretty easily, and it's really not a big deal to get different places in South Florida. But once I leave South Florida and want to head up to the middle part of the state or the northern part of the state or even the west coast, it starts to get kind of a long trip. A friend of mine was talking about his Tesla, and he was thinking about taking a trip up to Orlando. But normally when he drives, he takes up US 27. US 27 is another road that we have, but it's not an interstate. Most of the way you can drive somewhere around 60, 65 miles an hour, but there's this one stretch in the city of Sebring where you have to actually slow down to like 30 miles an hour for that period of time, 30, 35, something like that. Anyway, but the point is that along the way on that trip, there are no superchargers. There's none on that corridor, because they're on the main highways. You have them over on the Turnpike, on I-75 on the west coast, and on I-95 all the way on the east coast. But you don't have them going any other direction, so you can't go up US 27 with that. Now, there are some destination type chargers and some 240 volt outlets. Some of them are a little more higher capacity, but you're going to have to spend a couple of hours if you want to do that. So if you're thinking about a trip that way, where it's a little more leisurely and you're not driving on the interstate, you're driving along and you might have to stop a couple of times for longer periods of time to actually charge, because there aren't superchargers. And that's kind of the concern. I mean, the Tesla is great because you have all these superchargers along the way and there's different things you can do, but you lose out on the whole idea of being able to just kind of plan your route the way you want to take it, unless you're willing to stop and charge somewhere. So, you could take the route. I believe we found that there was a charging port that was a higher capacity port somewhere in Sebring near the airport there. And so certainly you could take the trip up there, and I think you can make the trip all the way from here to Sebring without having to charge. And then you'd charge there for an hour or so, and then you'd move on. So you could find somewhere to have some lunch or do something maybe, and make it work. So it would be a truly leisurely trip, because driving that route as opposed to taking like the Turnpike to get to Orlando takes a little over 4 hours, where typically from my house-ish to Orlando is about 3.5. So it's a longer trip anyway, and then you're going to add something onto it to make it even longer. So it's a bit of a conundrum in a way. How do you decide to plan your route? And we just started talking about this, and the whole thing about route planning and how that changes your route planning, thinking about this elongated period where you have to stop different places and plan your route. It's kind of funny how that works out. So that was kind of the thought about, trip planning. It just takes longer, and it's not that it's bad. You just have to plan for a longer period of time. And the thing that I've been noticing is, you kind of have to stop, as I think I said in my last video, you have to stop and smell the roses a little bit. There are times when you have to actually take the time and stop and think, wow, I'm going to take a little longer to get there. And that's not a bad thing. I'm going to enjoy the drive a little more. And as I get there, I may have to plan for other stops along the way and do some other things, but that may not be the worst thing in the world. If there's an attraction somewhere along the way that you can stop at that has a destination type charger or a 240 volt outlet, you could plug in for a while and certainly charge your car for some period of time while you're sitting there. So that's kind of cool in its own way. I mean, you could stop somewhere and do something that's kind of fun beyond just doing the drive. So you make it more of an adventure instead of just being a drive. We become so accustomed to our cars in many ways where we just take these road trips and we go somewhere. You know, we just think we're going to go here. We get in our car and we go there. And we don't think about the journey anymore. And that was kind of my thought as I stopped and took a moment and took it back and started thinking about what this meant. We have to think as electric car owners, how do you think about the journey and what does it mean to you? Car's enormously comfortable to drive. It's a great ride. I can imagine that if I had autopilot or if it were self-driving, it would be even better because I could just kind of hang out. The other thing I wanted to talk about was something that I noticed in the car. I've heard people talk about this and I just wanted to mention it too. When they did the last software update, I noticed that my top percentage, when I charged to 100%, for a while there, I was getting 215 miles out of my top. But what they've done is they've taken away about, I don't know, about 5 to 7% of my top mileage. So I can charge up to about 207 miles now. So there's something going on there, but Tesla did something in the software update that limits your mileage a little more. The other thing I noticed, and this was just me noticing this, is that when I drive, it feels like I'm using mileage at a faster click. I'm actually using my battery a little bit faster than I was in the past. Now, when I went on my road trip, I found that I was actually doing pretty well and pretty efficient with the battery. But remember the issue I had early on, where it was showing me that I was going to reduce to 5% of my battery by the time I got to my charging station. And there was something weird about that. There was some calculation it was doing, and it corrected itself along the way. What I'm noticing as I'm driving is the number keeps kind of going down, and it's going down at a rate that doesn't really make sense. You know, I was getting really good battery efficiency, and now I'm not. And I think it has to do with something in the software that's just doing some calculation or using the battery differently. I'm not exactly sure what. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I noticed that my watt hours per mile have changed too. I was getting very close to 200 most of the time when I'd be driving. Now it's back up closer to 240. And I don't know what changed. My driving habits didn't change. I took it on a road trip and came back, and it seems like it's creeping up a little bit. And I think that it has something to do with the software update related to the battery. Now, I have nothing to prove that. I have nothing to hang my hat on that. It's just an observation on my part that I'm noticing that my battery is getting reduced a little bit more quickly than it had in the past, and I'm not getting the same efficiency out of it, even though my driving habits probably have improved slightly. I just don't see it that way, and it's something weird is going on there with the software. But it's still, it's still fine. It's just, it was an observation that it seems to be changing a little bit, and I just wanted to share that with you. And so the other thing is, I really do enjoy having entertainment in the car. So right now I am actually waiting for someone to come out of activity they're doing, and while I'm sitting here, I was just sitting here watching TV because I can. And there's something really, really cool about that. There's something cool about taking my podcasts and just having them right in the car and not having to worry about it. So there's some pretty neat things that I'm able to do now that I wasn't able to do before that I really, really like. So thumbs up on having the entertainment in the car, because it did change a lot of things about the way the car works in that sense, where I feel like I'm getting more out of it. Now, how long that'll last and how long I'll have it in the car, I don't know. But I might be willing to set up my phone as a hotspot to continue being able to have that service available to me should Tesla decide that they're going to turn it off or disable it or charge you for it or whatever. I'd be willing to use my phone for it too, but for now it's just kind of cool to have it and just have the car there, and I'm using the LTE service and I'm able to connect up to something kind of neat about that, and I've gotten kind of used to it. I was waiting the other day for my son, and I was just sitting there watching football. There was a football game on, and I'm like, all right, I'll just watch it while I'm sitting here, because why not? What else am I going to do? So that's kind of neat. It's a neat thing to be able to do that and just kind of sit back and relax. These chairs recline pretty well. Actually, let me show you how far they recline. I'm going to go ahead and recline this car. Hold on. Whoa, recline my seat. I'm going back. I'm going back. Back. Okay. I'm not quite flat, but I am pretty far back if you take a look at this. So I'm pretty far back at this point. You know, you get a sense of it. My head is, you know, like looking out the window there. It's funny to lay back this far, but it's really pretty comfortable. So I can sit here and watch TV and just kind of enjoy myself and not have to worry about it too much, because I'm actually just laying back in the car and being pretty relaxed in here. This is a very comfortable seat. You know, now that I've ridden in it a bunch of miles, I'm very comfortable in it. A couple of seats, you know, they kind of fit you funny, or they just feel funny. This one does not. There's nothing about it that feels weird. It's actually a really nice fit. And the fact that you have the easy entry to be able to get in and out of the car, you know, it's both a blessing and a curse. There are some times when it's terribly annoying because you just want to back the car out of the garage and you're going to hop out of the car for a second, and the car moves into position and then moves right back out of position. It's like, why? Why does the seat have to do that? So sometimes I'll just leave it in an easy entry and just leave it that way, or I'll leave it in my configuration and just get out that way. But it's just funny how that works, those silly little things that you get there. You know what, and I gotta say, the view from here is kind of nice. I've never laid back in the car like this. Let me turn it around and show you the view. As I'm laying here, you can see me looking up at the camera there, and look, you know, I get the view of the sky and the trees and everything up here. This is kind of cool. It's actually kind of neat to sit in the car like this and be in this position. I've never done this before. So this is a first for me. It's actually very comfortable in here. And this is kind of neat. I get that sort of view of the world in a way. It's kind of neat.